a listener production.
America.
They're eating the dogs.
America.
We are not going back.
I am trying to buy your vote.
I accept your nomination
To be president.
Hey, Bension Siebert here with you for this US Election Day special episode of The Briefing. The results have been streaming in as voters deliver their verdict on Donald Trump and Kamala Harris battling to become the next president of the United States. Trump and Harris have been throwing everything they have at this up until the final moments, urging people to get out and vote even after the polls have closed.
Our Republicans, we're doing really well. If you're in line, stay in line. Don't let them take you off that line. Vote. Stay on the line. They can't do anything about it. And vote. We're going to win it big. Thank you.
For anyone who hasn't voted yet, I'm telling you, you're going to enjoy the process. It'll make you feel really good about just reminding you this is your country, this is your future, and you have a right to weigh in on where we're headed. So get out and vote.
Election Day has been marred by bomb threats in the key swing states of Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona, and by fake FBI accounts online that have been calling the integrity of the vote into question. Meanwhile, there's been wild weather in various places, from heavy rain across several states to snow to the threat of wildfires in California. And in some cases, people have waited hours in line to cast their vote. So when can we possibly expect to learn who will be the next president of the United States? To take us through the day's drama and what we can take from the results we've seen so far, live from Washington, D.C. is journalist Dave Levinthal. Dave, thanks so much for joining us once again on The Briefing.
Hey, good to be with you tonight.
Tell us, who's ahead right now?
Donald Trump may be ahead by at least a little bit. Now, everything is so fluid. We're talking at this moment in time, an hour later, 2 hours later, the numbers are going to change. More votes are going to be counted. The math is going to shift, and we could have an entirely different conversation at that point. But at this point, Donald Trump is doing very well in the state of Georgia, for example. Overall, the map is trending his way, but Kamala Harris absolutely is going to have plenty of opportunities to shut that down, particularly in a trio of northern states in the United States.
What is your view of the turnout this time? What's your read on that?
Turnout overall is extraordinary. A generation ago, we were bemoaning in the United States, oh, there's such apathy, and young people don't vote, and the numbers are garbage compared to many other countries all around the world. We don't have that problem anymore. And the enthusiasm, both for Kamala Harris and for Donald Trump, has been quite high.
So let's go through them. These are the 7 battleground states. These are the states where the election will be won or lost. It is 2:40 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, which is 10:40 p.m. where you are. What can we say about Georgia and North Carolina first?
Mentioned Georgia a moment ago. Donald Trump seems to be in the driver's seat there. It is not all done in the sense that some of the urban areas, all their vote totals have not come in. These are places where Kamala Harris ostensibly will do well, but the question really is it going to be well enough? Joe Biden won this state by just short of 12,000 votes, which is a real hair's breadth in 2020. And Kamala Harris, it would be a defeat both morally and actually if she lost that state after Joe Biden had won it, a state that typically trends Republican and had that anomaly in 2020 where it went the other way.
And North Carolina?
North Carolina is very much up in the air right now. At this very moment, Donald Trump is ahead. But again, it's an issue of, well, what votes have come in so far? A lot of areas where Donald Trump is expected to do well have come in. Kamala Harris, therefore, is a couple of percentage points trailing Donald Trump. But if urban votes and urban centers and the votes there come in a major way for Kamala Harris and she outperforms, plus some rural areas that are probably not too thrilled with Donald Trump right now, including areas of North Carolina that have just gone through an absolute disaster of the highest magnitude with a hurricane that came inland and dumped just incredible amounts of rain. It led to horrible flooding and dozens of people who died. Hundreds and thousands of businesses and homes washed away. This is something where the federal government, by most measures, has done a pretty good job, and that factors in, not that we want to speak in political terms here, but does factor in a political sense in Kamala Harris' favor, at least theoretically.
Okay, now we've got the northern states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Where are we at with those?
This is the proverbial blue wall. If Kamala Harris wins those three states, she is almost certain to win the election. But right now, she is trailing a little bit in Pennsylvania. Now, again, I sound like a broken record here, but many of the urban center votes have not come in yet. Philadelphia is going to be a massive, massive make or break for her. Some of the suburban counties around Philadelphia as well. She needs to perform as expected, if not better, in order to win that state. But of all the states, the 7 states that we're going to talk about here, Pennsylvania is the biggest prize in the sense that it has the greatest number of electoral votes. And in the Byzantine way that we run our presidential election, it's just not simply a national vote here. It's literally a state by state contest where you go state by state by state. You add up the different numbers of electoral votes, which are based on population of those states. And whoever reaches the magic 270 electoral vote threshold and hits it or passes it first is the one who wins the election. So Pennsylvania is going to be critical to Kamala Harris winning. And if Donald Trump wins there, then it's very difficult to see a path for Kamala Harris to win the election unless something fairly shocking and surprising were to happen.
So the final 2 states of the 7, we haven't heard anything from Nevada yet, but it is looking very close in Arizona, isn't it?
It is, and that was a state Joe Biden won as well, and it's a state that Kamala Harris may need, depending on how things go. But if she is to drop any of the 3 blue wall states, she's going to need some serious help from Nevada and from Arizona. One thing to know about Arizona and Nevada both is that they are notoriously pokey in their vote counting. So as a result, we can expect that those 2 states are going to go into some significant overtime, and not just because they are on the western part of the United States, where we are back in time a couple of hours from where I'm talking on Eastern time on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., but also because of structural issues where it's just going to take a little bit longer for them, or so we expect, particularly if the race is close, as it is almost certainly going to be.
Have any of the results really surprised you so far?
Not really, in the sense that it really, truly is a toss-up. This is a 7 battleground states that are as close could be. All the polling that had been done indicated that this is really just a matter of tens of thousands of votes that separate the candidates among millions that are going to be cast.
This might sound like a silly question, and maybe it's because of my not particularly good maths brain, but is it possible for there to be a 269-269 tie in the Electoral College?
There is. It is possible. And were that to happen, you would be talking about things in U.S. politics that we have not talked about as a country in a long, long time. You'd really have to dig into the history books where you, in essence, would have potentially the presidency decided by the U.S. House of Representatives. And we're getting into some pretty exotic political theory here. And it doesn't look like the way that the map is shaping up right now, that particular scenario is going to come to pass. The scenario that would be one electoral vote away from that is if Kamala Harris was to win the 3 blue wall states, everything else stays the same as expected. She would have 270 votes, which would be exactly the number that she would need at bare minimum to win the presidency. So, we love to play these mind games with ourselves among U.S. Political talkers and journalists and whatnot about what would happen if it was 269 to 269. But that seems at this point to be even less likely than it was coming into Election Day in the first place.
All that said, do we have any idea at what stage we might actually get the verdict, the result?
I think we need to buckle up for some time later this week. Are we going to find out tonight here in Washington, D.C., as we're speaking at 10:48 p.m. Eastern time here on Tuesday? Absolutely not. Are we going to find out overnight? Highly, highly unlikely. I think at minimum, the earliest that we could find out would be sometime tomorrow. But let's recall that during the 2020 election, the race was not called between Joe Biden and Donald Trump by the Associated Press, which is sort of the gold standard for calling races, until the Saturday after the Tuesday election day. So maybe it will go to the weekend, maybe it won't in 2024. But anyone who is looking for instant gratification and who expects that this thing is going to be wrapped up has not been paying attention to how unbelievably close this race actually is. And everyone's just got to chill a little bit because it is just going to take a long time. And I should note, too, that we've had some very unfortunate anomalies that are of nobody's fault, which is that there have been some bomb threats that have been called into different polling places around the United States. There have been other security concerns that has delayed polling. It has shut some polls down. And there had to be some legal action that was taken to open polls back up. Some technical errors. These are small things in the overall scheme, relatively speaking. But if you're a person waiting in line to actually exercise your right to go and vote, and you can't do that, you're probably not really happy right now. So there is that. And also, too, in the state of Wisconsin, there were about 30,000 votes that were early votes that were cast. And mind you, each state has a different way of handling its voting process. So in Wisconsin, you can vote early and not just on election day, which is the case in many U.S. states. But there was a security concern as to whether the votes had actually been opened up to inspection in an improper way. And so they're manually recounting those votes. I could go on, but I think you get the point that when you're talking about a country of 330 million people, and we're expecting well more than 150 million votes to get cast, you're going to have a problem here or there, and they have to be dealt with in due course. And that takes time sometimes, hence the delay in not getting results on election night when a race like this is so close.
Donald Trump has been casting doubt on the validity of this election well before today. Is there any doubt that he will contest the result if Kamala Harris wins?
If Kamala Harris wins, he will absolutely contest the result. You just need only to take him at his own word. He's telegraphed that for days and weeks. And based on his actions of 2020, it would be so supremely out of character for him to do anything but that. So if past is prologue, then yes, we would expect that Donald Trump would fight, fight, fight. He has also created through his campaign and through political organizations that support his campaign quite an infrastructure for dealing in a legal theater for any of the issues that he may want to address, court battles that he would fight, the overall election that he would contest. So yes, Donald Trump would not go quietly into the good night. Donald Trump would continue forward until he couldn't continue forward anymore, as unlikely as it would be for him to actually find redress in the courts on the grounds that this election was fraudulent or rigged or stolen or any of the words that, in terms that he likes to use. There has been, I should note, no evidence of any widespread fraud or rigging or anomalies of a vote stealing kind anywhere across the country. That's not to say that something might not come up in the future, but at this hour, we know of nothing, and nothing has been reported of that sort.
Given that Donald Trump is ahead by a little bit at the moment, do you think that he might declare victory tonight, even if it's not clear at all?
It's tonight or early in the morning, yes. And in essence, he did that in 2020, and he has been setting things up in the final days of the campaign to say that if he wins, he's won, and the election is great. And if he doesn't win, the only way that is possible is if somebody is trying to steal the election from him. So It's sort of a heads I win, tails you lose type of proposition for Donald Trump that he's putting forward. And that really speaks to what we just discussed, that he is just not going to concede this race. It just seems almost impossible, regardless of what the reality of the election is and what the facts are on the ground.
Watching from this distance, there's so many potential sources of information. Who are you looking to be sure of what's actually happening in the election verdict in each of these states?
Sure. A lot of us are going to the actual source material, which is the oftentimes county by county count that happens in the thousands of U.S. counties all across the 50 U.S. states. Now, luckily, we have organizations that do much of the heavy lifting for us. The Associated Press is indeed the gold standard. There's an outfit called Decision Desk HQ here that does fantastic work. I actually called the 2020 race a day earlier than the Associated Press in Joe Biden's favor. A lot of very smart people over there. C-SPAN, which is neutral news entity, as you are going to find, is doing some incredible work and always does. So I think finding the most neutral and historically reliable sources out there is good advice for any American or any non-American to take if they're really truly trying to follow the blow by blow, who's up, who's down. And then, of course, some of the notable media organizations, be that the Washington Post or the New York Times, who've had some pretty turbulent election season days here over the past few weeks, still nevertheless have incredible data operations and are running their playbook on schedule, as you would expect that they would.
How are you feeling in this moment as an American about the immediate future of your country?
Well, I think anyone is incredibly anxious. You might be a political junkie, such as I am. You might not be paying attention at all, but you're worried about, well, wait, what's going to happen? Is there going to be violence? What actually would a Donald Trump or Kamala Harris 4 years look like now that we're faced with the reality of having a new president get elected? So we're here in the moment. We're here in the crucible. We're getting numbers in, but we don't have final results for anything. So it is a precarious moment for the United States. And when you talk about violence, that I think is the big X factor here, is if one side or the other doesn't get the result that it wants after such a hard-fought and emotional and draining and high-stakes campaign and election, is there going to be some sort of a breaking point? And there's no saying that there will or won't be, but January 6, 2021 looms large in the United States still. And the violence that took place with the attack on the US Capitol, it proved the concept that something like that, something of that magnitude, can happen here in the United States. The thought of that happening again is something that people are thinking about. And all you have to do is walk around about 4 miles from where I'm coming to you from right now in Washington, D.C., and all the storefronts are boarded up and there's police everywhere. And it's high alert here in Washington, D.C. And I think that speaks to the moment that we find ourselves in.
Well, let me tell you, it's anxiety-inducing here as well. Dave Levinthal, thanks so much for joining us once again on The Briefing.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Journalist Dave Levinthal in Washington, D.C. there. That's it for this special episode of The Briefing. We'd love it if you could share this ep with someone you think might enjoy it. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can always check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and on TikTok and YouTube, search Listener Newsroom. We will be back in your feed tomorrow from 6 a.m. I'm Bension Siebert. Catch you next time.